Now we're going to talk about functions. A function is a block of code which can be reused over and over. By splitting our code into smaller functions, we make our code less prone to error and more maintainable. If you have a distinct piece of logic, such as converting between Fahrenheit and Celsius, this should go into its own function. In addition to this, if any code block exceeds 30 lines of code, you should consider splitting it into smaller functions as well. I've seen some files where a single code block was more than 1,000 lines long, and let me tell you, it was impossible to work with and make changes. Before we create our own functions, let's break down a line of code that we've been using all along, which leverages functions already. We're going to say console.log, hello, world. Let's break down this line of code. Console is an object, and log is a function attached to that object. When we use these parentheses and provide hello world, we're invoking the log function with the parameter hello world. To create our own function, we use the function keyword. We give our function a name. We use parentheses to define parameters to be passed into our function. We'll say param1 of type string. We can optionally define a return type. Here we'll say of type string. And then we can give it a function body. We use the brackets to denote that this is the function's code block. And then inside the function, we can give it a return value. We'll say return some value. Now let's change this function to convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius. We'll change our function name to be 2 Celsius. And then we'll change our parameter 1 name to be Fahrenheit. And then we'll change the parameter to be a number, since we'll provide Fahrenheit as a number. And we'll change the return type to be number, since we'll return Celsius as a number. Now the equation for converting from Fahrenheit to Celsius is going to be Fahrenheit minus 32. And then that whole thing will be multiplied by 5/9. Now we should test out our function and verify that it works. In order to test it, we're going to first create a variable, constant sum temperature equals 50. And this will be in Fahrenheit. And then we'll say sum temperature in Celsius is going to be 2 Celsius of sum temperature. Now we can console.log and we'll say Fahrenheit equals some temperature, and Celsius equals some temperature in Celsius. And when we run this, we'll see that the temperature in Fahrenheit is 50, and the corresponding temperature in Celsius is 10. To recap, to create a function, we use the function keyword. We gave it a function name. In this case, it was 2 Celsius. This function name could be anything we want. We have one parameter named Fahrenheit. The name of this variable could also be anything we want. The parameter Fahrenheit is of type number. The return type for the function is of type number. And in the body, we do our calculation to convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius, and we return that value. To invoke the function, we use the function name, and then we use parentheses and we provide it values for the parameters specified in the function. When we invoke the function, this will be replaced with the value returned by the function. In TypeScript, there's a newer notation for creating functions as well. This is known as arrow notation. For arrow notation, instead of using the function keyword, we'll create a variable, we'll name it 2 Celsius, and we'll say equals, and then the function is going to look very similar. However, between the return type and the first bracket, we'll use an arrow. Now, if we run this code, we should get the exact same results. So to break down an arrow function, we don't need to use the function keyword. We just have our parameters in parentheses. We have a return type, and then we create an arrow and our function body. In most cases, there isn't going to be any difference between creating a function or an arrow function. The difference only comes into play when we use the this keyword inside of our function. We haven't covered the this keyword yet, so for now, either way works. When creating functions, we can also have multiple parameters. So let's take a look at another function where we convert from feet and inches to centimeters. So here we're going to create our function, 2 centimeter, where the first parameter is going to be feet of type number, and the second parameter is going to be inches of type number. For this function, we'll break it into a series of steps. For the first step, we'll combine feet and inches. So say const combined inches equals feet times 12 plus inches. Now that we have the combined inches, the conversion rate between inches and centimeters is 2.54 centimeters per inch. Let's now test out this function by converting the distance 6 feet 5 inches into centimeters. So say const distance equals 2 centimeter of 6 feet as the first parameter and 5 inches as the second parameter. And we go ahead and console.log this, and we can run it. And 6 feet 5 inches is going to be 195.58 centimeters. We can also make parameters optional. Let's assume we want to invoke this function potentially with only feet. In order to do that, we can give inches a default value of 0. Now, if we wanted to invoke this with only 6 feet, we can do that and not provide a value for the second parameter. And when we run this, 6 feet is going to be 182.88 centimeters.